presentation will be on Rochester and the art of making love. London in the 1600s was often depicted as degenerate and frivolous in literature at the time. Historically, one is aware of notorious prostitution in low-life London, a thriving centre of England enriched with libertines, cuckolds and foppery. It's interesting, therefore, to study the poetry of John Wilmot, the Earl of Rochester, in this context with reference to immorality, vulgarity and the notion of love. I intend to explore Rochester's poetry in consideration of it as a celebration of love and as an acknowledgement of female desire, rather than as a purely pornographic depiction of London libertinism. In a text entitled Song, Rochester writes, "Two loves steer to the bed, youth and beauty fly together, and act so well it may be said, the laurel there was due to either. Twixt strifes of love and war the difference lies in this, when neither overcomes, love's triumph great it is." On first consideration of the poem, it appears to encapsulate the decadent society of theatre and performance. However, when neither overcomes, the understanding of a mutual affection emerges in the idea of two people performing together in a beautiful duet of love. The bed, in this sense, may be seen as a metaphor for the stage, a place of expression and physical demonstration of one's love for their partner. William Hazlitt once said of Rochester that his contempt for everything that others respect almost amounts to sublimity. And it's true that he may be seen to have a disdain for piety and propriety in the bawdy terminology that he uses within his works. However, it may also be argued that his poetry is indeed impressive upon the mind. He demonstrates an appreciation for what we may call the act of love. In 1676, an anonymous author published a text entitled The Art of Making Love, or Rules for the Conduct of Ladies and Gallants in Their Amours. They wrote that various have been the opinions concerning love, that passionate love I mean, which is only found between persons of a different sex, and the mistakes about it have opened the mouths of many wise and religious men against it, who speak of it as pernicious to youth, born of idleness and ease, and nourished by sloth and luxury, as a weed that grows up in youthful minds, which destroys the early seeds of virtue and hinders them in the pursuit of glorious actions, making no distinction between it and that brutish desire, which we call lust, with this difference only, that when our desires are determined to this or that person, it is called love. And that passionate love that they're talking about here is a key theme throughout Rochester's poems. This anonymous author is suggesting that what may be called passionate love is often mistaken by prudish society as being lust or desire. Now, in Rochester's ironically named poem, The Platonic Lady, he alludes to the art of love. The lady in the poem declares, "I could love thee till I die. Wouldst thou love me modestly, and never press whilst I live? For more than willing I would give, which should sufficient be to prove I'd understand the art of love." And in this first stanza, there's a differentiation of forms of love, modest love and artistic love. The former would appear to refer to a demonstration of love within the confines of piety and propriety, whilst this artistic love may indeed refer to sexual intercourse, or the passionate love that the anonymous author is referring to in The Art of Making Love. And Rochester's poetry arguably celebrates heterosexual love between men and women through the enjoyment of sex. The pleasure that a lot of these characters experience derives from a form of spiritual devotion to one another. If we take a look at Rochester's poem entitled The Imperfect Enjoyment, we can see that Rochester utilises sex as a means of exploring questions of morality and faithfulness. "My fluttering soul, sprung with a pointed kiss, hangs hovering over her balmy brinks of bliss, but whilst her busy hand would guide that part, which should convey my soul up to her heart, in liquid raptures I dissolve all o'er, melt into sperm and spend every pore," clearly speaks of the act of sexual intercourse. But in the potential of the man giving his soul to the woman's heart, we may see love. His orgasm is described with vulgarity and as a realistic element of sex, but one of the key themes of this poem is the man's inability to fully express his love satisfactorily. "False to my passion, fatal to my fame, through what mistake and magic dost thou prove? So true to lewdness, so untrue to love." The falsity to his passion implies that the man's passion should be far greater. The fatality to his fame would be due to his reputational male prowess, whilst the second half of that quote refers to the way that he wanted the duration of the act to last longer because he sees it as a demonstration for his love for the woman. Yet because it did not, It may be argued that he sees the act as not being special enough, perhaps more closely associated with an irregularity of desire, more suitable for a casual sexual encounter. In The Art of Making Love, the author makes a clear distinction between desire and love. They argue that love has often been mistaken as desire. In arguing that through a paternal love where a father tries to protect his daughter's virtue, he represses lust, which is the cause of what he calls these disasters. But he wrongly accuses love as being the cause. Unjustly, I say, for though that inordinate and irregular desire which we call lust oft proves calamitous, and the cause of many misfortunes, involving sometimes whole families in blood and infamy, yet without doubt love, when 'tis grounded upon reason, works far different effects, and is that which makes up the felicity of those in whose breast that divine flame finds entertainment. Of this love, I cannot say anything too advantageous. It is the soul of the soul of the soul, the very source of our laudable passions. So if lust is being described as irregular desire, then love arguably may be seen to be regular desire. We're inclined to see that this deviant sexual behaviour, deviant because it defies a sense of female propriety, as being more about lust, but this is not because we are comparing this behaviour with societal expectations for women. So our reason for this is because we all hold a vision of a virtuous lady as being a model of good and righteous behaviour within our own minds, but if we allow ourselves to become more open-minded, we may see that many sexual liaisons within Rochester's works can be seen as a declaration of love. So The Art of Making Love actually argues in favour of this argument on page 3 of the pamphlet, where it says, the most virtuous ladies, they have been writ as images of virtue and as representations of the beauty and glory of a life without blemish. Honour, generosity, courage and fortitude, and all other qualities which render a person most amiable, are set off in the greatest lustre to engage us to pursue the acquisition of them, and to render hateful and detestable the contrary vices, which are represented with all the deformity and destructive consequences. So Rochester's poetry, in light of this theory, would appear to offer acknowledgement of female desire without disfiguring them or allowing them to come to a bad end in most cases. Although having said that, a ramble in St. James's Park examines the idea of sexual infidelity. So, the ramble in St. James's Park is about a man walking through St. James's Park, thinking about drunkenness relieved by lechery, and the buggeries, rapes and incest made between people from all social statuses. And he's pondering the motive of a woman he has sexual relations with, seeking sexual intercourse from others. In the quote, has she picked out to rub her arse on some stick, prick, clown, or well-hung parson, each job of whose spermatic sluice had filled her cunt with wholesome juice? In the proceedings should have praised, in the hope she had quenched the fire I raised. Such natural freedoms are but just. There's something generous in mere lust. And the man of the poem is acknowledging the natural desire of humanity, but one may question these supposed natural freedoms in the context of love, because not only does it mock propriety, but it accepts adultery at this point, which would seem to contradict the idea of regular desire and monogamy and pure love. It's not until the end of the poem that we realise that this man loves this woman and feels pain in her actions. Why this treachery to humble, fond, believing me, who gave you privilege above the nice allowances of love? Did I ever refuse to bear the meanest part your lust could spare? It's demonstrative of the theory that regular desire is acceptable, but in love, not lust. And the man's final resignation that he will plague this woman and undo her, loathed and despised, get out of the town into some dirty hole alone, to chew the cud of misery and know she owes it all to me. May no woman better thrive that dares profane the cunt I swine. Is full of anger at the woman for satisfying her lust with other men. And St. James's Park in London would have been a place where people may meet nobility. Charles I walked through there on the morning of his execution, and Charles II kept his pet birds in an aviary there. Rochester may be seen to be in agreement with what The Art of Love states, that the virtuous are not all virtuous, and by placing sexual intercourse within such an esteemed location, may be a way of demonstrating that people of all social classes and professions have carnal desires. And in this poem, however, we could also look at the concept of the female liberty. Aphra Burn's poem, The Disappointment, refers to the soul and this concept of godliness and divinity that Rochester utilises in his poetry as a means of exploring sex and love. And Burn actually seems to incorporate many allusions to Rochester's own poetry in this poem. In the 5th stanza of the poem, the melted soul in liquid drops distills is reminiscent of the liquid raptures in The Imperfect Enjoyment, where she writes that not all her naked charms could move or calm that rage that had debauched his love. one is reminded of aspects of the art of making love and the line, "Lust, whose lawless rage is the cause of all these disasters." However, Burns' poem is surrounded in ambiguity when it comes to ascertaining whether it, like Rochester's poetry, is a celebration of love, or whether it's merely examining the elements of lust. As previously mentioned, Rochester's poetry not only explores sexual intercourse, but it also acknowledges female desire. His poetry would seem to demonstrate mutual consent in these sexual encounters. The women immerse themselves and arguably enjoy sexual freedom in these insights, a key element of libertinism. Of course, though, given the satirical nature of Rochester's poetry, his works cannot be taken too seriously. They're meant to be playful and daring, much like he was actually. So it would be wrong to assume that his poetry is absolutely a celebration of love and female desire, but it is one perspective of his texts. And there's quite a lot of limited information on the Earl of Rochester because his writing has been kept out of the literary canon, mainly because it is very vulgar and because it's been deemed not literary enough. But it would appear that John Wilmot enjoyed a very frivolous lifestyle, not entirely far removed from the modern sociological concept of lad culture that we have today. And Samuel Johnson even said of Rochester, "In a course of drunken gaiety and gross sensuality, with intervals of study perhaps yet more criminal, with an avowed contempt of decency and order, a total disregard to every moral, and a resolute denial of every religious observation, he lived worthless and useless, and blazed out his life and health in lavish voluptuousness." And his poems and songs are perhaps a reflection of his frolicking, yet with the constant references to love and disappointment and infidelity within his poetry, love is still valued and sought after. So, to conclude this presentation, John Wilmot's poetry may be seen to be bawdy and vulgar. However, it's not arguable that his poetry explores the deeper concept of love through sexual intercourse. His realist images of the act appear to evoke a spiritual or freedom element, and the passionate love is portrayed with great passion. So through the exploration of desire, which is experienced both by men and women, his poetry celebrates and acknowledges desire as an aspect of expressing love. Thank you.
4 minutes and 3 seconds.
Oh, yes.
Okay, questions for Sophie? Okay. It's clear you're trying to kind of present a counter-argument, which is that, Rochester's poetry is basically, he's just an old romantic, really. But you did also indicate towards the end of the presentation that this, this poetry is often satirical, that you can't necessarily take it at face value. So how can you kind of defend, you can't decide one position and defend it, you know what I mean? How can you be sure that the position you're taking in poems is actually the right one?
Well, to me, when I read Rochester's poetry, I kind of looked past the vulgar images that he was using, and I really focused on what he was trying to say about the act of sex. And if you remove kind of all the pornographic images out of the picture, you do see the soul, you see walking. It's about a physical connection to another human. It's about enjoying the moment. It's about appreciating another person's body. And to me, it just had this element of a very sensual element rather than sexual. So I looked at it that way, and I thought it was quite interesting. And then with the art of making love, where they would actually say, oh, yeah, actually, when we talk about sex and desire is usually mixed up with the idea of love and vice versa. So it seemed to make sense in that respect. I mean, it was published in 1676.
Right.
So it was a lot later than the time that Rochester was actually writing, because he did die. So he wouldn't have obviously seen that text, but it was interesting to see that that was a way that society at that time may have been looking towards the idea of publications like this that seemed overtly sexual.
Yeah, I was going to ask you to say a bit more about that pamphlet. I mean, what kind of readership did it seem to be directed at? What's its kind of angle?
Well, it was very kind of confusing. It's at some points towards the very beginning where it's talking about the passionate love. It's got such a dry humour that you can't quite work out whether it was meant to be satirical or whether it was kind of factual, but my own interpretation of that is that it was satirical because it's not something that society at that time would have been openly discussing, and it seemed a little bit tongue-in-cheek and something that they wouldn't really accept as being published. But yeah, I think it was definitely aimed as a bit of a comical kind of audience, one just a bit for entertainment purposes rather than any seriousness.
Okay, thanks.
Can I read this before?
Can you do